Welcome everyone, and thank you for attending today's CalHFA New Opportunities Committee meeting. I'm Dr. Fred White, the NOC chair. Item 1 on the agenda is the roll call. Melissa, could you please call the roll?
Certainly. Dr. White.
Present.
Member Cervantes.
Present.
Member Cabildo.
Here.
Secretary Moss. I'm not hearing Secretary Moss. Ms. Johnson Hall.
Here. Good morning.
Chair, we do have a quorum.
Okay.
Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. I neglected to do one thing. With the new Bagley-Keene regulations, I am supposed to let everyone know that we do have our members that are participating remotely, and that I need to ask each of the members if you have anyone in the room with you that's 18 years or older, and if you do, could you please declare your relationship with that person? Mr. Cervantes?
No one else in the room.
Okay. Dr. White?
No one else is in the room with me.
Ms. Cabildo?
No one else is in the room with me.
Ms. Johnson Hall?
No one else is in the room with me.
Thank you very much. With that, we can get started.
Thanks, Melissa. So item 2 on the agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes from our last meeting that took place on August 22nd. These minutes are in the package. Can I get a motion in a second to approve the meeting, the minutes?
I move approval of the minutes.
And I second.
Okay. Thank you. If there are no changes to the minutes or any objections, I deem these minutes are approved. So with that, we'll go to item number 3, chairperson and executive director comments. Just wanted to let everyone know I appreciate the committee members and the staff accommodating the frequency of these meetings. We're poised to move several items to the board, our meeting next month. And during our prior meeting back in August, we accomplished a couple of agenda items. One being the committee heard program concepts for an enhanced My Home Down Payment Assistance Program. And secondly, we heard concepts for the employer-based share appreciation program, both of which we will send those to the board for next month's meeting. I'll turn over to Executive Director Johnson Hall for further comments.
Thank you, Chair Dr. White. I just wanted to mention a couple of things. First and foremost, I also share in the excitement of the work that we are doing on this committee. It is the very first time in a very long time that a committee like this exists. The last that I saw dated back to the 80s. I was just sort of looking through our historical context and noted that these are the types of things that they would do during that period, and happened to be one of the periods where you saw a lot of movement and progress in the work that CalHFA did back at that time. So excited to see that we're moving in that direction. And then finally, I just wanted to congratulate one of our committee members, Ms. Maria Cabildo, who was recently announced as appointed to the now CEO of the Durfee Foundation. The staff congratulates you.
Thank you.
Certainly your work is so well pronounced in the universe of Southern California, and now nationally through your work with foundations. I'm excited for you and the work that you're going to be doing in the future.
Oh, thank you so much.
That's terrific. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you. I start in January, so I have a good break and I could hit the ground running in January.
That's great. Congratulations, though.
Well done.
So Chair, with that, I have no other comments. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Executive Director Johnson Hall. We will move to agenda item number 4, which is a review and discussion around the local housing investment partnership program concept. Erwin Tam, Director of Finance, will walk us through the methodology review for this new concept.
Sure. Good morning, Chair White and members of the New Opportunities Committee. Erwin Tam, Director of Financing, presenting this agenda item. The discussion today is focused on the agency's Local Partnership Investment Initiative, which has been identified by this committee as a priority. We've attached the evaluation worksheet to the board packet for your review. I'll just provide a brief overview of the concept and summarize the worksheet. I'll invite committee members to ask questions along the way, as I will not be going over the memo in a lot of detail. CalHFA has been evaluating a new lending program concept that will be complementary to existing MIP programs. This local housing investment partnership will finance new construction of affordable housing units in the anticipated 50 to 120% AMI range. As the committee knows, the agency's MIP program also started out in 2019 financing units with AMIs up to 120%. But the current program applicants have used this program to provide deeper affordability. CalHFA is uniquely positioned to implement this new construction financing program in California. We seek alignment with the statewide housing plan and the agency's strategic plan and business plan. One of the key features and benefits of this concept is that new units will be financed outside of the existing CDLAC, TCAC, and general fund financing system. In addition, this program will, 1, have CalHFA act as a project partner and permanent lender for affordable housing. 2, have a local public agency lease land for the development of the affordable housing. And 3, have a government entity own the improvements. The purpose of this is to achieve a tax-exempt cost of capital, which would lower the financing costs of debt on the project. If directed to proceed, CalHFA would develop a questionnaire to determine the contours of a new lending program. As I just mentioned, a governmental entity would own the improvements. Option A would be a partnership with a local public agency in which the LPA would own the improvements. Therefore, a lot of the financial and risk analytics further in the memo that was submitted in the board packet would not really be applicable. Generally speaking, with that option, CalHFA would be providing permanent debt and project management support for that development. Option B would be CalHFA ownership of the improvements with the potential investment. The agency has already conducted a risk assessment, as stated in the memo, involving this option. The questionnaire for local public agencies will also invite respondents to identify any other ownership structures or any other programmatic features that would help accelerate the successful construction of new affordable housing in the state. One last thing I wanted to touch on is that there have been efforts in this space already. Local public agencies and JPAs in California have financed new construction or acquisition of affordable housing in this AMI range. However, I believe that CalHFA is better positioned to deliver a scalable program that leverages the agency's strengths. Going back to the last meeting, 2 of the 3 programs that this committee has reviewed is that CalHFA is seeking to expand its lending activities, which is core to its foundation as the state's affordable housing lender. You may have heard me refer to this ability to issue bonds to finance our lending activities as the agency's superpower. But with this great power comes great responsibility. That's why I annually present to this board, or to the full board, not to this committee, resolutions authorizing staff to take necessary and proper actions to issue bonds. And that's why I'm here today to seek your input on this potential program. This does conclude my very brief overview. We'll be happy to answer any questions on the materials as submitted to this board, or this board committee, excuse me.
Thank you, Erwin. I definitely appreciate that. I will open it up to the committee for any questions or comments. Jim.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Erin, for the overview. We've been sort of like talking about this program off and on for the last 18 months or so by my count. So I'm glad we're here to try to sort of like move it forward in some form or fashion. I think the one thing I'd like to understand, you touched on this in the memo a bit, but these other structures that are out there in the markets, notably the use of a joint powers authority to, I think in most cases, acquire existing buildings and allow them to be used by the local jurisdiction for housing for employees or the like. Many of them have actually run into real trouble and where they've had cut-in defaults and maybe even actually real defaults. So I think it'd be helpful to sort of talk through the model we're looking at here and compare contrast with what's going on with these JPA deals that are kind of gone sideways.
Right.
I think it's important to understand, like, how do we avoid the fate of these other transactions that have been out there?
Well, I think the structure that we're contemplating, while similar, I think with the governmental ownership of it, it is different in a couple of different ways. One, CalHFA is a government agency with employees that are experts in affordable housing. Typically, the JPA staff may not have, they're not direct lenders in this space, whereas the agency already has a permanent lending activities. We also have an asset management division. So we are structured very differently than a JPA in terms of our staffing. Secondly, I also mentioned that we are direct lenders. We have a AA rated indenture, which we collateralize as well, above the loans that we are financing. And that is able to, so we actually can have a rated bond. I think a lot of these JPA structures, which you are referring to, were issued as non-rated debt. So again, we seek to lower the cost of capital and provide that additional expertise into the development of affordable housing. So I think those are some of the key financial differences. I think one of the other differences in terms of affordability, CalHFA, in terms of this sort of concept, is seeking for a range of 50 to 120. I think a lot of the ranges in those projects in the JPA essential workforce model are 80 to 120. We actually, again, have a requirement that we do units, 10% of the units at 50% AMI. So we do have a deeper affordability than in comparison. And our regulatory agreements, I believe, will be stricter than the other ones that were provided in the essential workforce projects.
Can I ask a follow-up on that, please? So think of the economics of repaying the obligation. If we're at 50 to 120 and the other JPA deals are at 80 to 120, does that make it harder to pay off the obligation because we're kind of going lower with respect to the population being served?
It may or may not. I think that one of the other features of the capital stack within the essential workforce models was there were a lot of ancillary fees and other things being financed out of the bond proceeds. You can see that being disclosed within the various official statements. I think as a perm lender with a very we would obviously use our own underwriting standards to provide a credit-worthy borrowing. So I think it will be different. I don't think it will be any more difficult in that sense, because we again have the other benefit is that we will have a lower cost of capital on the entire program. So yeah, I think it may depend. Maybe it wouldn't be as I think it depends on the region and the exact project, right? These were acquisition projects available at a very certain point in time given a very certain interest rates, and we're trying to provide a all-weather financing program for the state, one that is not dependent on interest rates being high or low, or acquisition prices also being high or low. That we would be a long-term development partner for local public agencies.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and maybe one last question for now. those JPA transactions were all, as I recall, basically acquisition of existing properties. Is that what's contemplated here, or is this new construction also?
This will be new construction, right? And I think that's, I mean, we, eventually, that's at least the current concept of this program, that we want to be additive to the number of units in the state of California. That's part of the reason why we listed this as a more scalable program, that we want to deliver more units. If you can imagine, the other acquisition program relied upon the availability of market rate units with an owner who wanted to get out of the ownership of those units. Again, those come and go at any point in time, and we don't, we want to again be a long-term development partner or a long-term financing partner with local public agencies. So again, not determinative of somebody else wanting to sell their market rate properties, to an affordable housing, for affordable housing.
So just to probe, so let's say Fresno Unified School District owns land. They have land which they're not going to use for schools, but they're really want to sort of facilitate housing for staff or faculty or whatever. That would be their in on a project, and maybe they just lease it or whatever at some nominal rate, and we arrange for the financing, construction financing, and the perm takeout. I mean, that's sort of the relationship between CalHFA and the local aid agency then. Is that sort of the model that you're looking at here?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
If I might add just one other comment, I think, Erwin, thank you. You did a really great job. I think also one of the challenges of the JPA model that we are not doing is it has been noted that they use a very, very aggressive underwriting model.
Yeah.
We're going to use the same tenets of our underwriting that we do for all of our traditional deals. So it's going to look, and when you add sort of the layer of the long-term oversight that we're going to incorporate as we do with all of our other projects, that to me lands very differently. We're not in it just to make money. We're in it to create more affordability in a market where affordability is really quite challenged in the middle income space. So I just wanted to point that out as something that I felt was extremely significant, is the underwriting.
If I may, I know I see Director Cabildo's hand up. If I may just elaborate on one final point there for Director Cervantes. I think that one of the again, the key tenets is this land contribution. So if you're acquiring something, you're acquiring the cost of the land into the deal, you're financing that. And the JPA structure leveraged 100% debt, right? So they also had a subordinate piece that sort of paid off, that needed to generate cash flow for a developer partner as well. So, they were essentially leveraged to the hilt, and the JPAs just provided sort of the conduit, even though the owner, they didn't provide any sort of, expertise or financial input into that. There is option B, and our model does provide, an option for local public agencies to partner with us, where we would provide additional capital, again, to address sort of the affordability question that I think Director Cervantes brought up. So again, lower cost of capital, less leverage in the deal. And then again, the local and the land contribution really will help sort of facilitate a project being, or new construction being successful in this model.
Thanks, Erwin. Thank you, Director Cervantes. I had a similar question. Maria, I see your hand.
Yes, so I have a few questions, and I'm interested in hearing, because I imagine you must have run some financial models. So I'm curious if you see this model available to coastal cities, so the city, is it going to work in LA County? Will it work in the Bay Area? So that's one of my questions, just in terms of like, are there geographies where it's going to work better? And what might we need to do for it to work in an LA County or a Bay Area? And the other is, there are so many public agencies, right? It's like there's a Department of Parking and there's a Department of, we think of the school districts because it closed in LA County, we're closing so many schools, right? Because of low enrollment. But is there like an ideal partner in terms of public agencies? And I'm thinking if, I imagine that you've also thought of just partnering with housing authorities, but housing authorities have their own bonding capacity, right? Potentially. So I guess just like in order to be an attractive partner to say housing authorities that have a lot of capacity to manage, like what would be the advantage of partnering with CalHFA versus they're doing their own development with their own financing capacity? So does those make sense?
Yes,
Okay.
it does. No, those are great questions. I think first, we have run preliminary financing numbers. Typically using, I think our most recent ones, we obviously receive a lot of applications for our perm loan product, and we sort of have tested those within our financing model. I will say that part of this exercise for us in terms of developing a questionnaire or soliciting sort of feedback from, the local public agencies is our model is only as good as the inputs and assumptions we put in there. If we're actually going to be serious about developing, for new construction, we need to figure out who the potential local partners are. And to your point, the localities have very different needs. They have very different AMIs. They have very, the realities on the ground are very different, throughout the state. So we would be kind of asking the questions as to how applicable is this everywhere. Our analysis, again, is preliminary feasible in multiple geographic locations in the state, but until we actually get, identify potential partners, our detailed and, our sort of preliminary analysis will just be that, right? Preliminary and sort of not, and subject to the actual realities on the ground. I will say sort of the second piece is, to your question is, what is the ideal local public agency? I think our concept revolves around probably a development of no less than 100 units with sufficient density, right? Because we are seeking alignment with the statewide housing plan, which calls for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, among other green building features. So we would want to see sufficient density for those the minimum of 100 units. In terms of what localities would get out of it, sort of their piece would be housing for their employees. So they would be contributing their own land. So an ideal partner would be somebody who could identify enough demand within their employee base for those 100 units. I will say there will be a provision for local public agencies to team up with each other, to that extent. We would be encouraging especially those agencies to work with overlapping jurisdictions. You mentioned like parking, or you can imagine every city, every county has overlapping jurisdictions amongst that they could work with, and sort of divvy up those units so that they're all multiple public agencies could benefit from this. So I think that and also I think some of the benefits that we've seen is new employee attraction and retention. So those areas that are seeking those as benefits, I think would be more natural partners for CalHFA in this program.
Edwin, what I was thinking of was and again, this isn't my I became an executive director way before I had to use bond financing as a regular way to finance projects. So from my understanding, housing authorities, I thought, had their own ability to issue bonds. So my question was, and correct me if I'm wrong. So my question was, what would be the advantage of, say, a housing authority that has its own ability to issue bonds to partner with us? And then the second is, it just occurred to me, right, that there was this new, I thought this new legislation around like universities and churches who also have land. And I'm curious if you've also had that conversation around what would it mean for us to be kind of a, what's the word that people say? Just a trustworthy partner, right? Because we
Yeah.
know that so many private developers are approaching these same entities, and we're kind of like a trusted voice for us to possibly be partners on that side. But the first is like, what's the advantage of, say, a housing authority or another entity that could issue its own bonds to work with us?
Right. I would say that one is that, so I'll take that in two parts. One, local housing authorities may not, since they are in sort of in this space already, may not be the optimal partner also for us, because again, we're looking for a local public agency that will, but all the entities that we're talking about, all local public agencies can issue their own debt, right? So you think about school districts, you're asked, we're asked regularly for school districts and community college districts and cities and counties to issue general obligation bonds. They are all capable of doing, financing this program themselves. The real kicker is for us is that, again, we as CalHFA have our ability, one, to scale statewide, combine perm loans on a statewide basis with our AA rated indenture, separate and away from everybody else, all the local public agencies who may not have this expertise in housing and issuing housing revenue bonds like CalHFA does. So again, it's a little bit different when if we're trying to, again, facilitate or the expansion of the development of affordable housing in the state. If we're asking every local public agency to become experts in issuing their own housing revenue bonds, whereas we already do that, and we have done that successfully, and will continue to do that successfully this year and in future years. I think that maybe that was one part of your question. I may have forgotten the second part of your question. If you can just remind me again.
Yeah, the second part was around, I think it was legislation that Senator Wiener sponsored around churches and I think it was universities to develop with some streamlining options for them. And so I'm curious if that's been part of your conversation too.
We definitely can work with community college districts and state universities as well, state colleges and universities as well to achieve this, to achieve development. They're more than welcome to respond to our questionnaire when it's developed and if pushed forward by this committee. I think that in terms of churches, I would assume that they,
and when I realize that we're talking about local partnerships because that has its advantages. So I don't want to take you off track. So thank you so much. Appreciate
no problem.
It was more a curiosity than anything else, but it's like to know and need to know. So thank you. You answered all my need to knows.
Right. Again, I would say that we are casting a very wide net and trying to find the widest audience, because I think that we are trying to evaluate it. I think when at this point in the development of a potential program, you cast as widest net as possible to try to figure out who is interested, and then develop a program that sort of addresses the broadest base of potential borrowers. So that's I think we're at in this concept development.
Thank you, Erwin. Thank you, Maria. Appreciate that. Any other questions, comments from the committee? Hey, Jim, go ahead. Yeah.
I think our executive director had her hand up first, so I'll defer.
I was just going to say that I think that part of our role actually is to oftentimes prove out to the market and the community that it can be done cost effectively, efficiently, and with the lens of supporting, full stop, the needs of affordable housing in California. And I think this is one of those opportunities where we can kind of push the envelope as a start and then demonstrate to the market that it can be done. I see that as a key role of a state agency like ours that has the liquidity, that has the balance sheet, that has the staff with expertise to actually demonstrate to the market. I don't see this as something that we will be doing. We're going to turn off everything that we're doing and now switch over, but let's get it going. Let's start it as we did with ADU financing, as we did with Green for All. It's just a way of telling the market it's okay for us to take a little bit more risk. And unfortunately, unfortunately or fortunately, we're in the greatest position to do that as representatives of the fourth largest economy in the United States, to actually, tap our toe into this and figure out what it looks like. I really love the staff's approach of starting out with an RFI, or we can name it whatever we call it. That allows us to engage the market and see what's out there. And it's a little bit different, I know, from what folks would traditionally see from a public agency, where we're sort of doing a NOFA and we have a set of funds and we have a set of guardrails and things that we are set up for us. That's also, I see, as part of our secret sauce, which is that we can actually test the market in ways that folks haven't been able to do so, to see what the market actually looks like, and then pull the things that we think are best to the forefront, that we would want to move forward. So there are things about this program that I like, and that's one of it. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, and have Erwin build out a little bit more is, one of the challenges that we have had here on the multifamily side is we've been a little bit of a one-trick pony since 2019, only doing things outside of our core business, which is MIP, to actually reinforce the multifamily work that we do. So we're leveling up a little bit on the multifamily side. And so, Erwin, I wanted you to talk, especially since you are also our CFO and leading this project, just about some of what we saw with the MIP in this current year and why we decided to sort of turn up the juice and how it actually could impact our operations and our revenue, the revenue side of the agency.
So thanks, Tina, for that question. I think that one of the things that the board had seen earlier this year was an initiative to expand a new lending program outside of MIP, and this came about sort of because of the reduction or potential elimination of the state tax credits, which are an essential ingredient for the MIP program. The MIP program depends on a couple of different things. One, a volume cap authorization from CDLAC, 2 tax credits from TCAC, and 3 SB2 monies that come in the door from the recording fee, the $75 recording fee from property sales. And so one of the things is that we realized internally very early on, or 2 years ago, was that SB2 revenues are incredibly volatile. And we're coming off a market whereby rates were artificially low for a while during the middle of the pandemic, and rates went way up. And it has slowed the real estate activity in the state. So our subsidy revenues have decreased substantially, coupled with the fact that our state's tax credits, again, sometimes, there was no reduction in this current year, but it will be continuously sort of, since it's not, it will be continuously an issue, in terms of the state budget. So we have a program that is set up on 2 of the 3 requirements are either declining or in question. And so that is the basis of our only multifamily lending program. So how do we, and even if we were to be able to shore up all those economic factors, we also understand that the capacity for CDLAC is also limited, right? We would be competing with everybody else to create those 17,000 units that are being able to be financed in a state. So we can compete with other entities for these limited resources at the state level, or we can come up with a plan that is outside of the state. And that's why sort of we've gravitated toward this. It accomplishes two different things, right? It accomplishes one, our goal one initiative, right? Lending impact. We want to have an impact on Californians in terms of providing more housing for low and moderate income Californians. And two, we want to do it in a financially sustainable way, which is our second goal. I'm going to go so far as to even say three, because I think Director Cabillo actually touched upon this earlier. Three is trusted advisor. So we are trying to partner with local public agencies in order for this to happen. It's not just CalHFA being like, we're building housing in your neighborhood because we feel like it. No, it's not that at all. What we're doing is we're identifying local public agencies to partner with because they themselves have identified the need for housing in their own communities. And we're coming with the financing solutions to be able to push those across the finish line. So I think so again, it's not, I appreciate, Tina's question because it just sparked me to kind of, say it's not just a financing solution. It's not just good for the agency's financial, but it actually accomplishes multiple goals that the agency actually has.
Thanks, Owen. Thanks, Tina, for that question. Jim, I see your hand. Welcome, Melinda.
So, this may be a bit of a segue off of our executive director's question, which is, so we've got let's say we bring this to board says, great. The process we're envisioning here is this RFI, which I suspect you've already drafted. So walk me through, or walk us through this. Like, let's say we get a green light at the October board meeting. What then? What's the timeline or the process?
So I think the development of RFI is currently happening within the agency itself. I think that with any sort of obviously the executive director is the ultimate authority within the agency to act on the agency's behalf. Since this RFI or questionnaire or whatever is not binding by any way, shape, or form to the agency, we would then summarize sort of the results to the board. We expect to run an RFI process or this process for several months because part of the questionnaire will revolve around identification of sort of where local public agencies think not only on the ownership structure and what they actually need, but potentially identifying what actual parcels they think are viable for this program. So we're going to ask them that. We're going to ask them about the salaries, because we're going to do the AMI calculations for them. We're going to try to make this as easy to contemplate, easy to fill out, easy to sort of respond to as possible, because we understand just like ourselves, we operate underneath certain staffing constraints. We don't want anybody to go and spend a bunch of consultant time or money or efforts or staff time and efforts to try to kind of tell us things. We just want to be we just want to identify who's actually interested in this concept and what they believe the contours are that they would need to, again, successfully bring new constructed units for their employees. So we would run that again for probably a 4-month period or so, come back, synthesize that, present those results to the board. At that time, we may or may not ask for funding, right? Because the board is in control of that piece of it. There are no, again, up until that point, there are no agency funds being directed or expended other than staff time on this process, right? So so we would need to come back to the board with findings and a sort of a proposal on what the next steps are, including an actual program to be launched. If again it comes the feedback from this questionnaire comes back in a way that we can actually design a potential program to address what people are identifying.
So this is very much like a test the waters kind of approach.
Exactly. Right. We don't want to be, again, we live in a very, very large state with a lot of different geographic regions. How do we design a program that has applicability throughout the state? That's going to be something that we're going to test for. This is not designed for any specific local public agency. This is designed again to cast as wide as net as possible, just to see what the actual sort of needs and demands are and the desires are of local public agencies throughout the state.
Okay, and I got a somewhat technical question, and then a comment. On the technical question, so my understanding was that these JPA deals that were done, the property taxes on the properties were waived by the county, respective county assessors, who are in some cases going back now and putting back up the bills for the property taxes on these projects. So is that, I mean, that to me is a meaningful number in the pro forma. Is that something that is just a reflection of how far south these JPA deals have gone, or is that something which is broader that is out there that you might be aware of?
Yeah, I think the property tax exemptions were tied into sort of the charitable use and the sort of the end the end tenant actually, and sort of their incomes and whether or not they actually qualified underneath the sort of like use of the property for affordable housing. So again, it also happened because these were acquisitions, which again was since they were at market properties, they were taxed, and then they were pulled into governmental ownerships, which meant they were not taxed. What we're proposing here is something a little bit different because, in theory, I expect that local public agencies are tax exempt. There also is no improvements on said land, so there is no tax base to be essentially lost in this process for any jurisdiction. So I think this is a little bit different from what the situation is happening with the JPA essential workforce housing structure.
Okay, and so my comment, which is I kind of go back to that workshop we had back in March, and Secretary Moss's comment about the overall target to statewide to facilitate 2.5 million units over the next 8 years or so. And so the fact we're talking new units, not acquisition, to me is meaningful in terms of what our charter would be. And to me, this is something we've talked about before, and I think we really ought to proceed and again test the waters and see if this concept is viable. Because I think that we can't just rely on the tools we used before, given the bigger picture what's happened in the state's budget. And to your point, the volatility of SB2 revenues and so on, it's like we need to work with something else using the assets and the financial strengths that CalHFA has built over the years. I think this makes a ton of sense. And I think it's sussing out the how do we avoid the pitfalls of the transactions that were done in this vein is going to be really, I mean, going to school on that to do something smarter than what these other deals were done is going to be important. But by the same token, those deals were done as sort of a black box, which made consultants a good deal of money. And I think that we're just operating from just a different framework from the get-go here, which to me gives us a better chance to really contribute to what the overall to address the need of the state. So I think this is really a great concept.
If I may also add that we're not just learning from sort of activity within the state, we're also learning from our HFA counterparts throughout the country who have various approaches. Again, California, we're kind of a little bit different, but there are applicable lessons learned, and we've talked to our HFA counterparts again throughout the country to kind of learn what they're doing, what their approach is to kind of inform this as well. So we're going to take that lessons learned from the JPAs, lessons learned from local public agencies, and this questionnaire, and hopefully synthesize something to the board and present that to the board, in terms of our recommendation and how best to proceed.
I think that's a great point. I mean, it's easy I've done this, to focus on the transactions in California that were dubbed workforce housing that are all kind of going south. Whereas there's this body of expertise out there with our colleagues in other states that we can also go to school on too, as examples of how to do something right. So I think that would be very helpful. Thank you.
really appreciate this discussion. This is great. Are there any other comments or questions around this agenda item?
Mr. Chair, I would just wanted to chime in. Good morning, everyone. Apologies for being a little tardy. But just, and although I wasn't part of the entire conversation, looking at the briefing paper and thinking about the concept, and then even to now, just really still think it's just this really solid approach, especially given the RFI, I was going to say concept, but that RFI approach, right? To really kind of explore what's truly out there. And I think it just really lends a lot of opportunity, no pun intended, for us to even think beyond from what we already been able to bring up in the meeting, right? So, I mean, really appreciate Mr. Cervantes' questions just around just process and flow and intentionality, and just Erwin, obviously you've done such a great job in thinking about, you know, all the T's to be crossed and the I's to be dotted around this. And so it's really hard to see too many risks that where we don't have benefits that outweigh. So I say all that to say, appreciate the discussion, and yeah, looking forward to the next steps on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Grant. I will echo everyone's comments here. I don't have much in terms of questions for Erwin. I asked those earlier this week. I will say this RFI process, this approach, this is what I would call a literature review. We're going to understand the lay of the land, and the findings that we expect. We may get those. We actually may get some other findings based off of the responses, and that may help us tweak some things. So I applied the approach of taking this out in a survey format to everyone we can think of. I do think it's important when this RFI goes out, in that the first few paragraphs in there, I would hope that CalHFA Director Tina Johnson Hall speak on how strong this agency is, and why you'd want to partner with CalHFA. I think that's very important. It's that chance to toot your own horn, because I still don't think everyone knows how many good things that this agency does, and you could lay this out in the RFI, and use that going forward. So, you know, with that said, I do think this is one of the other items that should get brought to the board, obviously, and you know, that's kind of that'll be my last thought on this.
Thank you, Dr. White. If I might just follow up, just a short follow-up comment. Two things. First and foremost, one of my very first conversations with Secretary Moss, she talked about something that we are now instilling as part of our DNA and culture, which is storytelling. You're right, 100%. We have one of the best kept secrets in the universe. And part of what I've been trying to do is to turn the volume up loud and clear. And it's particularly important in this era. I'm not going to steal her whole story, but just listen to this woman on tape and you'll hear how important and how this is sort of, I'm following her lead in helping to tell our story different and going into spaces where they don't know it. I recently went, as an example, to the San Joaquin Valley Housing Summit, and I'm sitting in between Marina Wyatt, who runs CEDLAC and TCAC, and Gustavo Velasquez, who sits on our board and runs HCD. And we all asked the question, how many people know who we are and what we do? And everybody, generally it runs like this. Everybody knows who Marina Wyatt is, even though she's only been here for less than a year. Everybody knows who Velasquez is. And 2 or 3 people know who we are. And so we need to change that as part of our storytelling. I'm taking to heart what you said, Dr. White, as well as what Secretary Moss has said to me personally, and professionally, in open space. We got the best story. And so we just need to tell it more. And this will be one of those ways that we can do that, to distinguish what we do and how we do it to support affordable housing continuum work in the state of California. So thank you for that reminder. And I'm glad I have many of the members of our staff here who can also, who get it, and who are helping to sort of turn up the volume on that messaging.
Thank you, Director Johnson Hall. I don't see any other hands up for questions or comments, so I will ask for public comment. Melissa, if you could check.
Sure. If anyone in the audience is interested in speaking, making a comment, please raise your hand using the raised hand function. It should be shown on near the bottom of your screen. I am not seeing any hands raised at this time.
Thank you. So we'll move over to agenda item number 5, which is other matters. Are there any other matters that the committee would like to bring up? Yeah.
I'm sorry, Chair White. Can I just, before we maybe hop there, so I gather we are going to move this item to the intent is to move this concept to the board at the next meeting, along with the other two we talked about our last session. That's where we're going, right?
Yeah, so the intent is to move agenda item number 4 along with the prior items in prior meetings. So we'll have 3 moving forward.
Terrific. That's great. Thank you.
No, thank you, Director Cervantes. Now we'll move over to other committee matters. Does committee have any other matters that we'd like to discuss? The one that I would bring up is, should we have a meeting before our next board meeting? It's one on my agenda. And I'll leave that to the committee to, to contemplate if we should convene one more time. Hey, Jim?
I think we've covered some good ground here with 3 concepts that are really intriguing. So I guess I'd say, unless there's like another brilliant brainstorm coming from staff, Erwin and Tina, you'll know, maybe we're good for now. I'm flexible. I mean, to me, this is a priority to try to come up to move CalHFA along. So I'm open to spending time if there's another brilliant idea. But otherwise, I think we may be good from what I can see.
Yes, sir. I just want to confirm that our next meeting is October 24th.
That's correct. The next board meeting is October 24th.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I would just also echo Director Cervantes' comments as well, that unless between now and then there's another concept that for us to discuss, just to keep the momentum going, I think meeting again is not an issue. But if there's nothing for that particular meeting that's new, I think that's just putting everything into that October board meeting and then reconnecting shortly thereafter when staff is ready for the next concept.
I'm in agreement with that. Director Johnson Hall, any comments?
And I was just, thank you, Undersecretary Grant. I do not believe that we have another one that is ready to go before the October meeting. I'm looking at Chris in the window. Just Chris, can you come? Thank you. So with that, I think we can confirm that this may not necessitate another meeting before the next board meeting. But however, there are some that are a little bit more distant out that I think will be ready before December. And so I can't commit to that right now because I know that the work is still very much in process. But we'll keep you in, Dr. White, either myself or Melissa will reach out to you directly to let you know where we are on that progress.
Thank you, Director Johnson Hall. There aren't any other comments or questions on agenda number 5. We could go to public comment on this. Yeah, Melissa, could you?
Yes, if there are any members of the public that would like to make a comment now on other matters under the committee's authority, please raise your hand and we'll call upon you. I am not seeing any hands raised at this time.
Thanks, Melissa. So with that, I move to adjournment. Agenda item number 7. Appreciate everyone's time and the discussion here.
Yep. Thank you all. Good work.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.